So hopefully you will recognize this as something that we have looked at. Using the extract any knowledge of economics. So yeah, that's just standard. You don't even need to think of that as part of the question. That is for every 25 mark essay. Assess the impact of a persistent current account deficit on the macroeconomic performance of the UK economy. So key terms, current account deficit. Hopefully we all know what that means. Macroeconomic performance. Very quickly, how should I treat this term in an essay? This is a little, in fact, quite a lot easier than macroeconomic stability. But what should I interpret macroeconomic performance to mean? Answer in the chat very quickly, and it's going to need to be speedy today. I'll try and do simple questions in the chat, but I want to keep the pace rapid. Ooh, it's telling me my internet connection is unstable. Let me know, guys, if there are any technical issues on your side. So in case that cut out or something, question is macroeconomic performance. How should we interpret this? It's obviously a key part of the question. How do we interpret this term, macroeconomic performance? You could answer this in 2 or 3 words, I reckon. Mira, thank you. Somebody. GDP is one way to measure it. Broader economic growth. Thank you, Drew. Wait, sorry, it just came up as DB. That was Devian. If objectives are being met or not. So, guys, if you weren't sure, so like there's 2 reasons people aren't posting in the chat, or 2 possible reasons, right? First is you're too worried you'll get it wrong and I read it out, or you can't be bothered, a mix of both. And the other is you don't know. If it's you don't know, Devian's basically said it as simply as possible if you are meeting the macroeconomic objectives. So this is very, very common term for you to see in essays, macroeconomic performance. The easiest way to tackle that is, are we meeting the macroeconomic objectives, such as Mira suggested, increasing GDP and therefore acquiring economic growth. So this is basically assess the impact of a current account deficit on growth, employment, inflation, not a current account deficit, because we can't really say what is the impact of a current account deficit on the balance of payments. Well, obviously it's current account deficit. So all the other objectives basically. But all right. So if you think back to my lesson on the theory here, so we sort of planned for this essay. It's a good way to apply some of the like basic ADS stuff as well. So our key points could be downward pressure on AD, and I think we're definitely going to make heavy use of that here. Possible debt, sign of poor productivity or underlying economic issues. And does anyone remember the evals? I think I gave quite a few. But I'd like to see if anyone remembers 1 or 2 of them. Some quite easy, some quite hard. I remember we had a good conversation about one of my favorite ones, or I had a good conversation with one of you about one of my favorite ones. So evaluation, anybody? I'll throw in a more complex one. Depends on what kind of goods are being imported. If you're importing capital goods, that's not so bad. If you're importing consumer goods, that's more of a problem because capital goods will at least grow the economy. Consumer goods will not, or capital goods will increase productive capacity. Consumer goods will not. Anybody? Other evaluations? Or am I flying solo? Okay, I'm flying solo. I'm gonna go for it. Depends on the size of the deficit relative to GDP. Maybe self-corrected, e.g. by a floating exchange rate. I think I only did 3 of these because I've tended to do 3 and 3 in these lessons. But another good one that I'm pretty sure we covered is maybe interpreted as a sign of economic success rather than failure. Okay. So this is kind of the theoretical background, just a very, very quick summary of what I probably gave as the key points when I covered this content wise. So it's now just applying this to this essay, right? And hopefully, when we look through the extracts, we will be able to use these exact points, or we'll get hints that will throw us towards these points. So if you've all downloaded the June 18 paper, what I can do is I can have that open on a separate screen, and then I'll read through that. So I'm going to try to do that in a couple minutes, again, just in case anyone's joined late. If you haven't, so in a couple of minutes, I'm going to stop scrolling up here and rely on you guys to look at the paper yourself, which you've hopefully downloaded. So last warning, basically download the paper, because I'm not going to be flicking up and down like this in a few minutes time. So all right, let's get to it then. So assess the impact of a persistent current account deficit on the macro performance of the UK economy. Okay. So we've got two graphs here. We've got the exchange rate, sterling exchange rate, effective exchange rate. So that means this is much more useful than a unilateral exchange rate, like a dollar to pound or pound to yen or pound to euro or whatever. An effective exchange rate implies that this is the general value of the pound against a basket of other currencies. So this depreciation in the pound's value that we can see is implied by the term effective exchange rate, that the pound has gone down against lots of other currencies, not just one. And quite a sharp drop as well. Okay, so Zoom is telling me my connection is unstable again. Please, guys, if there are any issues, post them so I know what is going on. But so this is potentially useful for one of our evaluations about a floating system self-correcting. And this would make potential sense there, because if the exchange rate is falling, this is exactly what needs to happen to the exchange rate to correct a current account deficit. So for a current account deficit to be corrected, the exchange rate, or one way for it to be corrected, is for the exchange rate to fall. If it's a current account surplus, then the exchange rate rising would correct that issue. So this could possibly be used in one of our evaluations. This figure here, very, very nice and easy. So it's showing us that we have a net surplus in services, which you should hopefully already know. And this is our monthly data. We have a net deficit in goods, which again, hopefully you guys already know from covering the current account. And the deficit in goods outweighs the surplus in services, which means we have an overall deficit shown by this line here. Now, given the question asks us about the persistence of the UK's current account deficit, and we've got data showing a persistent current account deficit, I think it makes sense just to put this right in the introduction. This does not really support points for or against. This is just very basic background information, right? Very basic background AO2. The question is on the current account deficit. What is the value of the current account deficit? It is minus 2.5 billion in November 2015. Very, very easy AO2 there that we could throw into the introduction. So, okay, let's have a quick look at this then. And so very, very quickly, I think, and then we'll start writing it and start using the PDF instead. So, okay, extract B, the UK's trade deficit. I'm going to give this a big skim read. In 2016, the deficit with the rest of the world widened. Exports fell despite a sharp fall in the value of the pound. That's quite interesting. I'm going to highlight that. I'm not sure why yet, but that's quite interesting. It's interesting because this is contrary to economic theory. Trade deficit in goods alone rose to 27 billion. This, I'll highlight that a different color. Okay, blue is my color for AO2 marks. Okay. So again, we could possibly just throw this in the introduction somewhere. It's easy data to talk about. So okay, exports fell by, yeah, I could possibly use that as well, but so okay, disappointing trade figures suggest that a 16% fall in the value of the pound since the referendums failed to lift exports. That is very interesting. So if we think about this evaluation I have in mind, that if the pound is falling, this will help correct a current account deficit. Sorry, here we go. The pound is falling, this will help correct a current account deficit, and therefore the deficit is not a problem. Um, but this is sort of a counter to that evaluation. This is telling us that the fall in the value of the pound has actually failed to lift exports significantly. So I think my gut instinct now is to consider this for the conclusion because it's effectively an evaluation of one of my intended evaluations. I might use this in my conclusion to basically say that one of my evaluations isn't very good. One of my arguments is not very good, and use that to help shape my conclusion. That's my gut here. I'm not going to drop it, even though it contradicts one of the points I'm thinking of making. Um, an economist said, if we are lucky, the weak pound may boost exports. So that's the theory. Strong pound exports dear, right? Weak pound exports cheap. So this is very interesting, almost counter evaluation. Export growth tends to be driven more by the strength of overseas demand. That's basically saying exchange rates aren't that important in determining the level of exports and imports, which is very easy evaluative comment. Okay, others point to a lack of competitiveness and low productivity. We could use this. This it seems to be more about the causes of the deficit. Notice this has given us more evaluation than actual points so far. So that's quite interesting. Maybe it will be extract C, which gives us a bit more on that. In quarter three of 2016, the UK economy grew much faster than many economists had initially expected, with signs that growth had been supported by rising consumer spending. I like that as evaluation as well, because it suggests that even if you have a current account deficit, you can still grow if consumption is high enough, which again suggests it's not necessarily that much of a problem. So that could be an interesting evaluative comment as well. This is just more about the exchange rate not having the expected theoretical effect. So we could use this, but it's just more of the same, really. It's saying exactly the same thing as what we've had earlier, that the fall in the value of the pound hasn't lifted exports. So last paragraph, in recent years, the UK's earning on assets overseas has fallen relative to earning of foreign investors. Now, this is about the more complex part of the current account, right? The primary income balance. So the UK's earnings on assets overseas have fallen. Again, this is why there is a current account deficit. If there's not as much money coming in from the assets British people own overseas, that explains why the current account has fallen, but doesn't necessarily help us explain the macroeconomic consequences. So let's see what we've got. This contributed to the deterioration in the current account balance, leading to a record deficit. It's very easy, AO2. Although some argue that a current account deficit is not a problem. I think this is the quote we were directed to by the question. Others point to the worryingly large and persistent nature of the deficit. I think we'll use this. Very easy quote to use, very directly relevant to the question. The effects on employment, right, here we go. So they've only given us a couple of sentences here that are actually really directly relevant. The need to attract inward investment. So that's interesting. The idea that a deficit will put people off investment. Possible negative effects of growth and living standards. So I think that is really our key. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this in a different color. I've just realized that the highlighting means I actually need to stay on this document, which is really stupid, but we live and learn, huh? Also, that's not a good color. Green. Too green. Oh no, what am I doing? There we go. Okay. So I think that's the key material for this question. But let's have a look at this next extract. Germany's surplus on the current account of its balance of payments surged to a record level in 2015. That's very interesting. So 8.5% surplus, that is quite a bit bigger than our record deficit. Could potentially use that. I think that's quite complicated, but anyway, it has now overtaken the Chinese surplus as the largest imbalance in the world. This imbalance is clearly causing problems inside the Eurozone and globally. If the German current account is in surplus, it implies that other nations are in deficit. Although the German government views the surplus as evidence of economic success, there is growing pressure from other countries and the European Commission for Germany to take steps to reduce the surplus. So, without even going further, this is not hugely useful. And you might be thinking that yourself, but the reason is this is about a surplus country, and we're being asked, of course, what is the impact of a persistent deficit? So this is not immediately useful unless the impacts of a surplus relate to the impacts of a deficit, which of course they do, but it's a little harder to use for sure. I certainly think this is one of those interesting extracts where like the bread and butter stuff is here. And if you miss this, you're really, I think a lot of students are really going to struggle to use this extract to answer the question or to come up with key points. Hopefully, if they know their sort of key points, they can get good theory anyway. And maybe if they've done some reading, current affairs, they can still get good AOT. But I think unless a lot of students are gravitating here, they might struggle to use this extract. It's why these things I've highlighted in blue are maybe quite important. Just very easy quantitative information, often that just tells you like what is the GDP value, what is the inflation rate, what is the deficit. That is almost the easiest thing to put in an essay, usually introduction, and that can sort of help ensure your marks if you do struggle to use all of the extract. But certainly this one has given us much more evaluation than actual points. And this, I think the only thing I'm drawn to maybe is this, because obviously other nations includes the UK in this context, right? If the German current account is in surplus, well, that is based on the deficit of other nations. So in this case, the UK importing more from Germany than we are exporting to Germany, in value terms at least. And I think this could be very interesting, difficult, but interesting to use for our debt point. So again, there was no other indication for this point given. So far, this is by far the hardest of the points I taught you to include. But the way I'm thinking about possibly using this is to explain that a deficit country is basically faced with excess outflows, right? Where it doesn't have inflows to cover the outflows. And in simpler terms, it's spending more than the money it's generating. So it then has to sell assets or borrow foreign currency from other countries to buy the imports or cover the excess outflows. And it makes sense, surely, that you are not going to be able to borrow or sell assets to other countries with a deficit because they are going to have the same problem. They are not looking to buy assets. They are also looking to sell assets in order to generate currency to pay for their deficit. So it makes perfect sense that basically deficit countries will be funding their excess outflows by generating income from surplus countries. So it is almost like this huge recycling where the UK spends money on German products, which gives the Germans a bunch of foreign currency, and then the Germans can use this to buy, say, UK bonds, corporate bonds, other assets, government bonds, and that generates the inflows back into the UK, which cover the spending. So without overcomplicating it, I think, and it might be a bit late for me to say that, but I think this basically gives us a clue about the way the debt situation works, where the deficit countries are effectively forced to sell assets to the surplus countries is a very, very good mirror of what happens with the US and China, where the China is actually the I believe the biggest holder globally of US government bonds. And that's because China sells so many goods and services to the US. It generates all these inflows of dollars. It's got this huge current account surplus and big pile of dollars. And then it just uses those dollars to buy US government bonds. But anyway, again, I tried not to overcomplicate it. Apologies if I've not done that so well. This very nice valuation. So there's a very clear indication again that this evaluation has been hinted at strongly. The role of exchange rates in the current account, big theme in this set of extracts. But all right, I think I'm going to move it on there because I'm going to need to start actually writing this thing soon. So okay. I think we've got enough to go on. So from this point, I might still be flicking up and down actually, because again, I might need to use specific quotes. That was very silly of me, but should have done the PDF from the start already. But okay. So at least one of the benefits is if you haven't already been doing it, you can hopefully make the same highlightings I have or your own. But anyway, all right, let's get on with this. So I'm gonna try and keep this relatively simple. I'm gonna do 3 points and 3 evaluations, I think. 4 is often seems from the examiner reports the best way to an A star, but it's just so difficult to do 4 time conditions, with evaluations with a chunky conclusion. So if you can, great. For me, for this essay in particular, I don't think it's going to be possible for me. So okay, let's just start with current account deficit occurs when the value of outflows, let's be more specific, of trade and income outflows exceeds the value of trade and income inflows. This, the current account is specifically broken down into 4 components. Anybody in the chat before I finish? I'll type a little bit slower than usual. Net trade in something, net trade in goods, net trade in services, primary income, and has anyone done it? I've been saying, Mara's almost done it. Secondary income. Okay, yes, secondary income can be known as net transfers. So okay, very nice, guys. So all right, that's just some basic AO1 out the way. Macroeconomic performance refers to the general success of the macroeconomy, which is most commonly assessed through the degree to which economic objectives such as growth and employment are being met. All right, that's a pretty AO1 heavy paragraph, but that's cover all my bases. I think I'm going to actually have a separate little paragraph here for AO2. And again, what I'm trying to do for the examiner here, and I have seen this in other essays that have got full marks, in kind of breaking the normal structure a bit and splitting my introduction into 2 parts. One that is just the pure knowledge, and one that's going to be a very, very AO2 context heavy paragraph. I've even seen people do a diagram in the second paragraph as part of an introduction if there's like a key diagram, but that's more common in micro, I should say. So okay. The UK has had a persistent current account deficit, with the last annual surplus being in 1984. according to the ONS. So that is background knowledge. But as I've said many a time, you should, especially about growth, inflation, employment, current account, just get a couple of stats for every topic, and then anytime you get an essay on that topic, you just throw them in the intro, like I'm doing here. With and the last quarterly surplus being in, I had to check this one recently actually, 1997 or 8, depending on the source. So I actually got very confused. I can't remember who I was teaching, but I think I said 1997 in the lesson, and then I looked just to check off the lesson. It was 1998, and then I looked again a week later, and I found a different source saying 1997. Anyway. So last quarter service being in 1997, 8, depending on the source. We, I think, can throw in some of these easy AO2s I had earlier as well. We can see from extract B, that this issue may have worsened with a quotes record deficit of 5.4% in 2015. And there was, of GDP, I should stress. I'm not sure I'm going to use this in hindsight. Maybe I'll use it later, but I like the record deficit point more. 5.4% GDP in 2015. More recently, the UK's 2021 deficit was 0.5%, and 2022, I can't remember the exact figure here, around 3%. Both of these was according to the Commons Library. The persistent nature of this deficit may arguably have significant consequences for UK economics. Okay. So again, we've just kind of flooded that with AO2 just to try and make sure we're getting kind of like at least a mid-level AO2. And then if we can also use the extract or a bit of current affairs knowledge or historical knowledge in our points, then should be good to go. But okay, let's start this first paragraph then. So I think we're going to tackle the easy stuff first. And let's just going to remind myself what the question is. Just refocus myself. Impact on the performance. Okay. Impact of the deficit on the performance. We've defined the deficit. We've said like, there was a big deficit and it's very persistent. Impact on performance. So we've got to directly link, how does having a current account deficit affect growth, employment, blah, blah, blah. Okay, nice and easy. So let's start with one significant impact on performance, maybe in terms of GDP and economic growth. Okay, so there was a quote, wasn't there, on this, as extract B mentions. So let's take this quote. As extract B mentions, quotation marks, in fact, let me change the grammar here slightly. So as extract B mentions, there are possible negative effects on growth and living standards that may arise. Oh, that change in font is really annoying me. Let's clean this up a bit. That's a bit better. That's much better. Okay, so let me erase. This is because, and now we're just going to get heavy into the theory. This is because a current account deficit usually implies downward pressure on aggregate demand. When the current account is in deficit, and I'm just going to try and do a very nice, simple step-by-step explanation here. When the current account is in deficit, this usually, I say typically means net trade in goods / services are negative, and therefore M is greater than X. Let's make this, and therefore overall net trade X minus M is negative such that M is greater than X. So really, really simple stuff. And this is the kind of thing where hopefully by the time you get to the exam, you are all autopilot. Literally for these sentences, like I'm not trying to be, arrogant here or anything, but I don't even have to think about it because it's so simple, because I've done it so many times. I'm literally on autopilot here. So that's kind of the goal. And then the more complex points like debt, exchange rates, blah, 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 you kind of have to think, but we should be able to do this paragraph very, very quickly to a good standard. So as the AD equation equals C plus I plus G plus X minus M, negative net trade will lead to a decrease aggregate demand, which, as shown in figure 1 below, will consequentially lead to a fall in real GDP from Y1 to Y2. Not going to mention the price level because I'm not talking about deflation. Inflation here is just not relevant. I will show it on the diagram though. Consequentially, to a fall in real GDP from Y1 to Y2. This, if persistent, may cause a recession. Let's just throw in some very, very easy AO2, defined in UK as 2 consecutive quarters of decreasing GDP, which in turn will lower living standards and therefore the UK's overall macroeconomic performance. So clear link back to the specific wording of the question. That's it. It was nice and tidy. If you look at the 25 out of 25 essays that they've put in exam reports, I think possibly the only difference is maybe this is a little AO2 light compared to what I've seen. But again, we've had this like whole paragraph of just jamming AO2 in, so hopefully it would be covered in that sense. But in terms of like the theoretical standard, you don't need to go much more than this, which actually kind of surprised me the first time I saw it. I thought to get 25 out of 25, like it just had to be unreal. But basics done well, as long as you got a lot of it, and you're good. So let's have a very nice, simple evaluation here. I think so. We talked about floating exchange rate. I think I'm going to use that later though. Keynesian LRAS could be an interesting one here. I think depends on size. Again, could be an interesting one. Let's go with depends. No, let's go with Keynesian LRAS. Okay, evaluatively, the extent to which the objective of economic growth is harmed depends on the initial starting position of the economy on the Keynesian LRAS curve. And I'm going to change this slightly just to make it a bit more professional. Evaluatively, according to Keynesian macroeconomics, and then I don't need to say Keynesian down here, the extent to which the objective of economic growth is harmed depends on the initial starting position of the economy on the LRS curve. If the economy is near or at full capacity, as the LRAS tends towards verticality, so basically where it becomes straight. If the economy is near or at full capacity as the LRS tends towards verticality, a fall in AD will not cause a significant decrease in GDP. In the case of the UK, at the time of the article's writing, oh, Jesus. In the case of the UK at the time of the article was writing, there were very high employment levels, and therefore the impact may have been limited. So that's again just trying to use a bit of the context. And the UK's had very close to full employment for quite a while. But I'm being a bit cheeky here because the UK, the Keynesian model doesn't really model the current UK situation very well, where we have full employment but also very poor growth, which doesn't really happen in the Keynesian model. So okay, anywho, let's move on because I'm likely to overrun with the conclusion at this rate. So especially if I want to put 3 points in, I'm going to need to be nice and quick. Let's do a very quick one on debt. I think, and then I'm going to do employment last of all. Okay, macroeconomic. Let's say second. Macroeconomic performance. Sorry, guys. May also be affected by again, I'm going to change the wording slightly. I want to say like it could be affected by a debt crisis caused by. Let's refer back to the question, right? When in doubt, refer to the question. A persistent current account deficit may lead to financial instability that damages macroeconomic performance. An example of this can be seen in the Asian financial crisis. Anybody know the date? Asian financial crisis is not the 21st century, sometime in the 20th century. I'll fill it in later. An example of this can be seen in the Asian financial crisis, where countries such as Thailand and Malaysia ran heavy current account deficits, which were financed by selling assets or borrowing to generate foreign currency. And I think it is one of these weird points where, to be honest, to be blunt, being able to understand it isn't as important as being able to explain it. It's lovely if you can understand it. It is complex, and to be honest, even the way I understand it is really like a simplified version of the way it actually works. Anyone who understands the way this actually works in full is basically a genius. There's maybe like 2 or 3 of such people in the whole world. So don't worry too much if you're still struggling to really like fully wrap your head around how this stuff works. I don't know if that moment will ever come, but the really important part is you can explain it. And the the essential concept is simple. You got too much money being spent, not enough money coming in. You got to generate that extra money somehow to cover your spending. So in the example of the, oh wait, let's finish off what I was doing first. Finance by selling assets or borrowing to generate foreign currency. In Has no one put in the date? No one put any guesses for the date? No. 1997. Oh, Niet. That was quick, just in time. Okay, well done. So, in 1997, um, investors, let's say financiers, ooh, financiers, people who finance other people through worried, concerned, let's say, concerned about the ability of these countries to sustainably fund their deficits and stopped investing capital into the countries which left them unable to fund their import spending and led to large foreign currency debts. So there is a lot more complexity here, but because I'm going for 3 points, I'm really having to trim it down. But effectively, what is happening is the current account deficit has gone so large that the people funding it, which remember is technically the surplus countries, like technically China is kind of funding the United States current account deficit. When it gets so large, the people funding it worry that, much like you would if you were funding an unprofitable company, I'm not sure I want to fund this anymore. So maybe I'm going to stop buying the assets or lending the money that allows them to pay their deficit, or I'm going to increase the interest rate that I want or the return that I want in order to compensate me for the increased risk. And this can lead to large foreign currency debt crises where you end up owing loads and loads of money to financiers in other countries in a different currency, which is itself really dangerous because of exchange rate fluctuations. So again, there's a lot more depth to this, and I could be like, if it were a lesson, I'd be going into that more detail maybe, but again, because of time constraints, I want to kind of keep this nice and quick. So in the case of the UK, so here we're going to use that nice, lovely Germany reference earlier. Just copy that and then figure out how I'm going to use it. In the case of the UK, it likely funds its deficit by selling financial assets. So that is on the financial account, and we basically cover our current account deficit with a financial account surplus, selling financial assets to surplus countries like Germany. Quotes. There is a better way to use this quote, but for time, I'm just gonna keep it like that. Okay, so now we need an evaluation. Evaluatively, I like exchange rates here, I think. Evaluatively. In theory, in a country like the UK, which has had a floating exchange rate since 1992, since Black Wednesday, 1992. I don't know if that's an exact date actually, so I'm going to be a bit careful. In fact, you know what? Let's cover my bases. Following Black Wednesday was definitely the event that kicked off our desire to have a floating exchange rate. If you haven't heard of it, I'm not going to explain what it is here. Look it up afterwards or something. Just be too long. But I don't know exactly when we implemented the floating exchange rate following Black Wednesday, to be fair. So, we just had a floating exchange rate following Black Wednesday in 1992. Should not be concerned about this impact of a current account deficit because the exchange rate will correct deficit automatically over time. Okay, and I should also note, it's very interesting. There's a big weakness in this paragraph. Anybody spotted it? Okay, I'll give it like 30 seconds, minute in the chat. There is a problem in that paragraph. I got carried away. I didn't think of something, and I've just luckily had the presence of mind to be thinking about what I'd done in my head and think, wait a second, what is the problem with this paragraph? It's not to do with the theory. It's not to do with the AO2. There is a problem. Anybody? No. Thank you, Niyati. Yes, yes, right. I did it at the start. I'm sorry for everyone else. Niyati has said, link back to the question. Current account deficit on macroeconomic performance. What I have done here is I've said why a current account deficit is very bad, and if I may say so, included some very nice examples of that. But I haven't actually linked it back to this macroeconomic performance, like growth, employment, blah blah blah. So let's do that somewhere. This seems like the appropriate place because the next bit is just applying the argument to the UK instead of Asia. Devak, yes, I will. I'll just attach this essay to the Google Classroom afterwards. So unable to fund their input spending, and this led to large foreign currency debts. The financial crisis that followed was incredibly destabilizing to the macroeconomic performance of the Asian, Southeast Asian economy, causing lower growth, higher unemployment, and in Japan, a deflationary crisis which has not yet been escaped. This has ended up being a 2-pointer instead of the 3-pointer. Oh, I can't help it. Just go overboard. So again, for a 3-pointer, these have ended up being very, very big. But all right, let's very quickly try and get a third one in. I think I'm going to have to leave that evaluation there, but it shouldn't matter too much because we get most of the evaluation in the conclusion. So I think we're going to do a very, very quick employment point, even though I've already alluded to that briefly. And for that, we are going to yeah, it's a bit weak, but I think I'm going to take this. This stuff I pointed out earlier, I'm going to bring that in the conclusion, I think. So okay, let's go for it. So effects on employment. All right, a final impact of the deficit on macroeconomic performance is that employment could decrease. This relates to the decrease in aggregate demand previously discussed. So do not repeat the same analysis change. I will have to add some sort of new analysis chaining. which is what I am going to attempt to do. So this relates to the decrease in aggregate demand previously discussed and is alluded to in extract B, where it mentions the effects on employment. I'm just going to ignore the really annoying font difference. No, I'm not, because it's changed my font automatically. The effects on employment that are a cause for concern. When, oh Jesus, when aggregate demand for goods and services decreases, it is inevitable that demand for labor also decreases, given that aggregate means total demand for goods and services, and that labor demand is always derived from new demand for goods and services. This increase in unemployment may also cause issues for the UK's government finances, where debt currently stands at over 100% of GDP, as more unemployment means less tax revenue received from income tax and more government spending required on welfare. Okay, so one more evaluation, and then maybe I'll have 5-6 minutes. I'll probably overrun a little to finish the conclusion. So okay, let's say evaluatively. Evaluatively, I am drawn to, depends on the size of the deficit. I definitely want to talk about it in my conclusion as well. Depends on other sources of spending could also be good. We had a little clue for that in the extract, actually. So I think that's what I'm going to do, actually. So let's go back to that clue that I'm thinking of here. Here we go. In quarter 3 of 2016, the UK economy grew much faster than economists had initially expected. Right. So basically, this quote here tells us that the current account deficit in and of itself is not enough to cause aggregate demand to go down. If the growth has been faster than economists expected, the economy has been growing, it's been going up more rapidly than they thought, despite the deficit growing. And that's, of course, because there are much more important factors of AD, which is basically what this is getting at. So evaluatively, you could even phrase this, I don't think I'm going to here, just to keep it simple, but you could phrase this as a ceteris paribus evaluation, where if you apply ceteris paribus, there will be more unemployment. But if you don't apply ceteris paribus, consumption could change, as well as the current account deficit rising. And that might mean you don't have a fall in AD and therefore a fall in employment. So whether employment falls or not is highly dependent on other factors besides the current account deficit. And these other factors may be more significant in determining AD and net trade. Extract B also mentions that the UK economy grew faster. I'm using the ellipsis because I'm paraphrasing this basically than economists. Oh god, there's so many. Faster than ... economists ... expected. Okay, the UK economy grew faster than economists expected, and that this was supported. Oh, I should probably put that in quotation marks as well. Supported by rising consumer spending. So let's just explain this very briefly because this evaluation. This implies that an economy or the withdrawals caused by lower by m being greater than x may be counteracted by consumption rising, and therefore a current account deficit does not guarantee unemployment. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Right, and I am going to have to rush this conclusion. Sorry if you guys have things to get to. I just spent too much time going through the actual extract, I think. But we'll just throw in a very, very hopefully quick conclusion. I want to talk about exchange rates a bit more, and I want to talk about the size of the deficit. And then I think we're good. In conclusion, so first thing we want to do, by the looks of it, for AQA conclusions is just a very, very quick summary of points. The current account deficit may damage macro performance in terms of the objectives of growth, employment, government finances. So I think those are the main things I talked about various ways throughout the essay. However, this ultimately depends on arguably, use a bit more cautious language here, arguably depends on the exchange rate system, the what else we talk about, the changes in other factors in the economy. And what was my first one? Oh, and the initial position of the economy. However, it could be argued, it should also be considered, be noted, I do like that, noted that the how are we going to put this? So I want to use that exchange rate information to kind of evaluate the evaluation and use that to make a conclusion. Hopefully you'll see what I mean. It should be noted that the exchange rate argument may be very flawed, maybe flawed, let's not say very flawed in the case of the UK, and therefore there should be concern about the persistent deficit. This is because, as extract B highlights, oh, this is quite nice. This is quite nice. I like this. Export growth. That's lovely. That is lovely. So I could use any of this. The 16% fall in the value of the pound since the EU referendum. But I think this is really, really nice quote. Could use either, to be frank. So let's just integrate that somehow. Extra B highlights. I think that should just slot in actually. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think I need to change that at all. Export growth tends to be driven more by the strength of overseas demand rather than exchange rate. Therefore, the floating system by itself will not correct the deficit. And I've already said there should be concern, so I'm not going to say that again. The size of the deficit is also important in judging how much concern should exist. As mentioned, the UK has recently had a record deficit of 5.4%, which is quite close to the Asian 5 economies during the financial crisis. This is a bit of my NAO2 that, again, I just know for topics such as this coming up during the financial crisis, which had around 8% deficit size as a proportion of GDP. Therefore, whilst there are arguments on both sides, the evaluative arguments carry less weight due to the inability of exchange rates to correct the deficit and the large size of the deficit. The UK should indeed be concerned